Here is Rowan Radley, a boy who doesn't fully understand what he is, but often feels like a bit of an outsider. He has a passion for photography, and one of his favorite subjects is a boy he secretly has a crush on. Rowan's parents are hosting a party to celebrate his father's birthday. During the party, Rowan and his sister, Clara, sneak away to grab some booze. As they're sneaking around, Evan, Rowan's crush and Clara's best friend, jumps out from behind them as a joke, startling them. Evan laughs and asks if they're stealing alcohol. Rowan, trying to sound cool, explains that they're gathering supplies for a private party they're planning to have with a couple of friends. Here, you can feel Rowan's nerves as he tries to impress Evan without giving away how he really feels about him. Whenever Rowan is around Evan, he has this habit of reciting romantic poetry. In the middle of their conversation, he does it again, his words heartfelt but a little awkward. Evan, caught off guard but amused, gives a small, confused smile. The moment feels tense, and Evan excuses himself, saying he's off to grab more drinks. When Evan returns, things take an uncomfortable turn. Clara's friend, Tilly, begins openly flirting with Evan. Rowan, watching from the sidelines, feels a surge of jealousy that he struggles to hide. At the party, Rowan secretly takes pictures of Evan from a distance while Evan is dancing. During this moment, Tilly, the same girl who had been flirting with Evan earlier, joins him on the dance floor. She starts dancing with him and eventually kisses him. Evan seems to enjoy it. Hurt by what he sees, Rowan stops taking pictures, becomes upset, and leaves the scene. Later during the party, Evan's father arrives to take him home. He confronts Evan and, in a stern tone, asks if he wants to end up like his mother. Evan's father appears to be very protective of him, and the reason for this will become clear later in the story. That evening, Rowan returns home to a chaotic scene. He finds his sister, Clara, in a state of shock while their parents are panicking. Clara has killed one of her male classmates, Stuart, who had attended the secret party they held earlier that afternoon. Her vampire instincts had unintentionally taken over when Stuart tried to force himself on her. Rowan demands to know what is going on. Overwhelmed, his parents explain the situation. They reveal that they are part of a long line of vampires, and that this legacy has been passed down through generations. However, they chose to live differently. They describe themselves as abstainers, vampires who avoid drinking blood in order to lead a normal, human-like life. They explain that they hid this truth from their children to protect them and shield them from the burdens of their vampiric heritage. In disbelief, Rowan asks if they are joking. He then anxiously questions whether he will turn out like Clara. His parents admit they are unsure since the process varies from person to person. Frustrated and terrified, Rowan lashes out. He accuses his parents of being selfish for having children, knowing they might inherit this life. His anger and fear bubble over as he scolds them for putting him and his sister in this position. Later that evening, Rowan's dad gives him an old book titled The Abstainer's Handbook. The book is meant to guide him on how to cope with and navigate his vampiric nature. Along with the book, his dad also provides a helpline number he can call if he has further questions or finds himself in an emergency. After the conversation, his dad leaves, and Rowan pulls out the photos he had been taking of Evan. To his surprise, he notices that most of the pictures focus on the back of Evan's neck. It dawns on him that this might be connected to his vampiric instincts. After all, vampires and necks are famously intertwined. This realization makes him panic slightly as he begins to grapple with his newfound identity. The next morning, Rowan is introduced to an uncle he never knew existed. His uncle, who turns out to be his father's identical twin, is portrayed by the same actor. Rowan is visibly puzzled by this unexpected revelation. His uncle is an active vampire who has been called to help cover up Stuart's murder. To do this, the uncle uses a form of vampire telepathy known as compulsion, a mental ability that allows vampires to manipulate or erase memories to conceal the truth. Rowan and his uncle share a lengthy conversation about what it means to live as a vampire. His uncle provides candid insights into their shared heritage and the complexities of their nature. As the conversation ends, Rowan glances out the window and spots Evan walking with Clara. A small smile spreads across his face, hinting at his feelings. Noticing Rowan's reaction, his uncle picks up on the connection between Rowan and Evan, though he doesn't comment on it directly. Evan and Rowan's sister, Clara, go into a boutique to do some shopping. While there, they have a conversation, and Evan shares his concerns about his father. He talks about his father's growing anxiety and overprotective behavior, explaining that his father wasn't always like this. Evan reveals that his father used to be a policeman, but changed drastically after Evan's mother disappeared when he was a child. He confesses that both he and his father still miss her deeply and recalls the happy times they shared as a family when it was just the three of them. During the conversation, Evan tells Clara that he wishes his family could be as normal as the Radleys. Hearing this, Clara makes a subtle, "if only you knew" expression. But she doesn't say anything. Evan then asks Clara if she wants to hear what his father has been ranting about. He explains that his father has been obsessively talking about vampires, claiming that they are everywhere. Clara pretends to be surprised and, with a deliberately casual tone, responds that it's strange, trying to hide the truth about her own family. On their way back home, they see Evan's father sitting outside their house, waiting anxiously for Evan to return. His face is tense with desperation. When he notices Clara, he stares at her intensely, as if he has picked up on something new or unusual about her. The next day, Evan visits Clara in her room. As they talk, he brings up Stuart's disappearance and mentions how he hopes Stuart will either be found or that justice will be served for his murder. Clara, feeling the weight of her guilt, becomes visibly uneasy but tries to mask it. While they are talking, they hear Rowan playing an old, loud song in his room. Evan listens for a moment before asking Clara if Rowan dates anyone. Clara, slightly amused, responds that she can't imagine her brother dating anyone. This moment subtly hints that Evan might have feelings for Rowan too, though it's not entirely clear yet. Afterward, Clara excuses herself to go get some ice cream. Alone in Rowan's room, Evan enters and tells him not to turn off the music, saying he likes it because his mom used to play it all the time. As Evan looks around, he notices the photos Rowan has taken and compliments them, saying they are cool. He begins asking Rowan questions about his photography, including if he can touch some of the photos. Rowan, with his unmistakable "I'm so in love" eyes, says yes. As Rowan explains the photos, the two get physically closer. Evan points to a particular photo and asks what it's about. Rowan responds with one of his romantic, poetic musings. "There's this feeling I get. It's like sometimes I lie in the grass outside when it's dark and quiet, and I can feel the whole town sleeping. I can feel everyone in it, and I can feel the whole world. And suddenly, there's no difference between you and me and the sea and the trees, all the cells in one drop of blood and all the stars in the sky." After the speech, there is a short, awkward silence. Evan, looking puzzled, simply asks, In that moment, it feels as though Rowan is about to confess his feelings for Evan. However, the moment is interrupted when Clara suddenly enters the room and takes Evan away. A few days later, Rowan visits his uncle in his travel trailer. During their conversation, Rowan asks what it feels like to drink blood. His uncle responds with enthusiasm, saying it's the best feeling in the world. In a moment of temptation, his uncle pours himself a glass of blood and drinks it in front of Rowan, enticing him to try it. Rowan declines. To lighten the mood, his uncle takes him out to a party, and the two have fun together. At the party, his uncle explains the perks of being a vampire. He tells Rowan that as a vampire, he can have anything he wants and control anyone he desires using their mind-controlling abilities. Rowan appears to be slowly drawn to the idea. It seems like it's only a matter of time before Rowan finally drinks blood and fully activates his vampire abilities. The next morning, Rowan looks very hungover. His father scolds him for drinking alcohol and for being negatively influenced by his uncle. Rowan, frustrated, snaps back, saying that at least his uncle is cool and doesn't obsessively try to fit in. In a moment of anger, Rowan blurts out that he wishes his uncle was his dad. Later, Rowan and Evan cross paths in the neighborhood. Rowan notices that Evan looks a bit sad and asks him if everything is okay. Evan replies, "Not really," referring to his dad's ongoing anxiety. Rowan, genuinely concerned, tells Evan that if there's anything he can do to help, he should let him know. Evan expresses gratitude for Rowan's kindness, and for a brief moment, it feels like Rowan wants to hug and comfort him, but hesitates. As Evan walks away, he suddenly stops, turns around, and asks Rowan if there was something he wanted to say the other day, back in Rowan's room, before Clara interrupted them. Rowan looks caught off guard, and after a moment, says he can't remember. Evan seems a little disappointed but doesn't press further. Rowan goes home and heads to his uncle's trailer, looking for him, but finds it empty. As he searches, he starts to smell blood. Following the scent, he discovers several bottles of blood stored in his uncle's fridge. Curiosity and temptation take over, and Rowan hesitantly dips his fingertip into one of the bottles and tastes a single drop. Almost immediately, he experiences a euphoric rush. Unable to resist, he drinks the entire bottle. As he does, his vampire instincts awaken, and his fangs emerge, a clear sign of his transformation. Overwhelmed by his newfound urges, Rowan impulsively takes 2 more bottles from the fridge and leaves the trailer. Later that evening, Rowan decides to call the helpline listed in the abstainer's guide that his father gave him. He has several questions about his developing vampire nature. One of the most pressing questions he asks is about saving a victim of a vampire attack by transforming them into a vampire. The helpline operator explains that this process is known as the fiery act of conversion. She elaborates that once a human is converted into a vampire, they will experience an insatiable craving for the vampire who converted them. Upon hearing this, Rowan smiles, clearly pleased by the idea, and it's obvious what he is contemplating. He asks whether this bond would still apply if the victim had never shown romantic interest in the one who converted them. The operator confirms that it would. Rowan's excitement, however, quickly turns to unease when she clarifies that this craving isn't like love. Instead, it's the opposite. While the victim will crave the vampire, they will also harbor a deep hatred toward them. This mix of desire and resentment creates a tragic and unbreakable bond, one from which the victim can never escape. Hearing this, Rowan's smile fades, replaced by sadness and fear. He begins to question whether he can go through with what he is planning. Will he still follow this path? That remains to be seen. The next day, Evan gets ready for school. While looking for his dad, he stumbles upon his father's investigation board, dedicated to Stuart's disappearance. On the board, he sees that the Radleys are prominently connected to the case. There are pictures of Clara and Rowan pinned alongside other clues, and to his shock, some of the photos are the same ones he had taken on his phone. It becomes clear to Evan that his father has been secretly investigating the Radleys for months. Confused and upset, Evan confronts his father and demands to know why the photos from his phone are on the board. His father admits that he hacked into Evan's phone, claiming it was necessary to keep him safe. Evan, visibly upset, tells his dad to stop and insists that his mother wasn't killed by vampires. She left them, and he needs to let go of his obsession. His father then attempts to justify his actions by revealing that he found Stuart's sunglasses, which had Clara Radley's fingerprint on them. He claims this is proof that the Radleys are vampires. Evan counters that the sunglasses don't prove anything. He points out that during the party, everyone, including himself, had handled them. His father, for the first time, appears uncertain and deflated, as if everything he believed might be falling apart. Seeing this moment of vulnerability, Evan begins to cry. He pleads with his father to move on from his fixation and focus on rebuilding their lives together. He tells him that they can still be happy, just the two of them, if he lets go of the past. After a moment of silence, Evan's dad apologizes. He promises to try and get better and to leave the investigation behind. During the school day, Evan and Clara are chatting when Rowan walks in, looking completely transformed. His new style, fresh appearance, and glowing demeanor make him nearly unrecognizable, likely due to the blood he consumed. Evan is stunned when he sees him and turns to Clara, asking, "Is that really him?" Rowan approaches with newfound confidence, sits close to Evan, and boldly declares, "You are the most gorgeous boy I have ever seen. You are the most beautiful boy I can imagine. Everything about you is beautiful." He goes on to explain that he's written poems about Evan, but feels they don't capture how he truly feels, so he's confessing his emotions openly and honestly. Evan, completely dazzled, listens intently. The two lean in as if they are about to kiss. But instead, Rowan asks Evan if he would like to go out with him tonight. Overjoyed, Evan agrees, saying yes without hesitation. Rowan promises to pick him up later and leaves, brimming with pride at finally expressing his feelings. Evan turns to Clara, still in shock, and asks, "What just happened?" At this moment, it feels like Rowan might no longer feel the need to convert Evan to a vampire to keep him close. But then again, things aren't always so simple. So stay tuned to see what happens next. Later that day, before the date, Rowan drinks another bottle of blood to energize himself and stashes one in his jacket just in case. He picks Evan up and the two head out for their date. Even though his father had promised to abandon his vampire-related suspicions, he still appears slightly on edge. Rowan's uncle watches Rowan and Evan leaving for their date from his trailer window. He smirks knowingly. Whatever he's thinking, it's bound to complicate matters. Rowan and Evan are on their way to their date destination, exchanging smiles like two lovebirds basking in newfound affection. They arrive at a game house where they immerse themselves in various games, laughing, smiling, and thoroughly enjoying each other's company. During one of the games, Rowan stands behind Evan, watching him play. As Evan concentrates on the screen, Rowan's attention is drawn to his neck. He stares intently, unable to control his growing vampire instincts. His teeth subtly emerge, and he leans forward, seemingly about to sink them into Evan's neck. Just then, Evan screams in frustration over losing the game, snapping Rowan back to reality. Shaken, Rowan quickly excuses himself, saying he'll be right back. He rushes to the bathroom, hoping to calm his predatory urges. But instead of regaining control, he succumbs to temptation and consumes the remaining bottle of blood hidden in his jacket. Staring at himself in the mirror, he screams at his vampire side, warning it not to touch or harm Evan. The guilt becomes unbearable, and Rowan leaves the game house abruptly, running away without saying anything to Evan. After some time, Evan notices that Rowan has been gone for too long. Concerned, he heads to the bathroom to check on him but finds it empty. As he turns to leave, he is suddenly confronted by something, or someone, that leaves him utterly terrified. Meanwhile, back at home, Evan's dad is anxiously waiting for his son's return. His phone buzzes, and he looks down to see a text message from Evan that simply says, "Help!" Panicking, his dad grabs his things and rushes out the door to find him. Rowan, overwhelmed and in panic mode, rushes to his uncle's trailer to talk about how disastrous the date was and how he almost hurt Evan. He confesses his fears, explaining that he felt on the verge of losing control. His uncle tries to calm him down, offering him a drink. Just as Rowan is about to take a sip, he pauses, noticing a strange scent. The unmistakable smell of Evan's blood wafts from the mouth of the bottle his uncle had been drinking from earlier. A wave of dread washes over Rowan. He breaks down, his voice trembling, and asks his uncle if Evan is dead. His uncle, dismissive, tells him to stop overreacting, suggesting that there are plenty of other nice boys out there. Rowan demands an answer again. His uncle finally admits, almost nonchalantly, that he might have killed Evan. He explains that Evan was too good to waste. Furious and devastated, Rowan lashes out, hitting his uncle. This sparks a brutal fight between them. The fight drags on longer than expected. Just as it seems his uncle will finish him off, Rowan's family arrives, stepping in to rescue him. Together, they overpower his uncle, who is ultimately killed in the struggle. Meanwhile, Evan's father arrives at the game house, only to find his son lying unconscious in a pool of blood, barely alive. He picks Evan up and carries him out, calling the abstainers helpline in desperation. "My son has been bitten by a vampire," he says urgently.
"That is really bad. I think he's gonna die."
"I'm sorry, sir. This isn't one of the scenarios I'm trained to deal with."
She explains that she hasn't been trained to deal with such situations. Furious, Evan's father pleads, telling her that as a vampire herself, she must know what to do. After a long pause, she reluctantly provides two options. Either let Evan go and accept his death, or give him vampire blood to save him. The latter, she warns, would mean transforming him into a vampire, a choice with serious and irreversible consequences. Desperate not to lose his son, Evan's father brings him to the Radleys for help. The family agrees to intervene and takes Evan to Rowan's room. Evan, barely clinging to life, looks at his father and whispers an apology for doubting him. He admits that his father was right all along about the existence of vampires. His father, fighting back tears, tells him it's okay and reassures him that he's going to be all right. The Radleys then leave Rowan and Evan alone in the room. Despite his weakened state, Evan manages a small smile, which Rowan returns. Rowan gently kisses Evan on the forehead before giving him a drop of his blood to save his life. the transformation begins, keeping Evan alive but turning him into a vampire. It's poetic, isn't it? The very man who was on a mission to bring down the Radleys for being vampires now has a vampire as his son. In the end, Rowan does what he once considered but never imagined would happen. He converts Evan into a vampire. But Rowan is fortunate. Evan already likes, or perhaps loves, him back. Hopefully, this mutual affection will protect them from the negative effects of the bond created when one vampire converts another, which often leads to destructive craving and hatred. Now the two of them are bound together as vampires, in love and destined to share eternity. Could there be a sequel? I, for one, would love to see more of their story. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, but if I could wish for one thing, it would be a kiss scene. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.